Are we at a tipping point, like the banks during the 2008 financial crisis? Is the Common Core too big to fail? New York State was awarded, and how did we get so lucky, $700 million of Race to the Top money that in reality has not been dispersed to the school districts. For example, North Rockland has received $239,000 spread out over 4 years, a drop in the bucket compared to the almost $4 million the district has spent to implement Race to the Top mandates. The New York State Education Department has spent $12.9 million on modules that are rife with errors, poorly written, and contain last-minute lesson additions. Teachers that instruct the higher grades report that many of the lessons are simply unusable. I have said to many that if I had written lessons like the ones in the modules while trying to earn my tenure, I would have been labeled as ineffective and hence fired. It is obvious that many of these modules were not written by teachers in the trenches. Force-feeding cognitively inappropriate concepts down the throats of children will absolutely not create lifelong learners. Teaching for 28 years has allowed me to experience many educational trends. What I have learned is that there is no magic bullet when it comes to teaching, just good practice and a love for teaching. Comparing American students to countries that are not multicultural, have socialized medicine, and have well-tracked, in other words, vocational versus college-bound educational programs are misleading. But yet our politicians and billionaire boys and girls clubs continue to use flawed and unconvincing statistical conclusions to promote the myth of the failing American public school system. What are some alternatives to the Common Core and its linked high-stakes testing? If we use the National Assessment of Educational Progress, NAEP scores, which are supposedly internationally benchmarked, although I do question other countries' student samples with regards to its randomness, then we should be looking to the state with the highest scores, that being Massachusetts. How about we use their guidelines as our learning standards? Oh, never mind using a curriculum that has already been tested and written. It's not profitable to the corporations that are looking to destroy public education and create revenue off the backs of our children. How about creating a system of authentic assessments, portfolios, where required skills mastered are delineated by grade or developmental level? Oh, once again, not good for big business either. I am here to ask those who we vote for, that represent the people, to please offer parents, students, and teachers support along with sincere responses to our concerns. The Common Core, the high-stakes tests, and the data collection for the Bill Gates initiative called In Bloom. I also respectfully ask that you also please refrain from replies that use New York State education and Common Core eduspeak. It sounds disingenuous. In addition, please try not to insult us with the offers of non-transparent committees to look into the problems. It is unfortunate that Governor Cuomo, Commissioner King, and Regent Merrill Tisch have been walking around with their ears closed to parents, students, and educators during the forums across New York State. It is because of their lack of concern for what we know is the right thing to do that I, as a parent, am suggesting a strong statement must be made. I am asking that all Rockland County and New York State parents have their children refuse the New York State 3 through 8 tests in April. Deprive the New York State Education Department of the data that they are seeking. Our children are not a test score. Our children are not labeled as failures, or not to be labeled as failures. Allow our children to learn in nurturing environments. Allow our children the time to grasp standards and curriculum content that is developmentally appropriate. Parents, you know what to do. Commit to make a statement to those who will simply not listen. Refuse the tests. Pencils down before this becomes too big to fail.
I did not write a speech. I'm not a politician. I'm not even really educated on all the details about this. I'm just here to speak for my children. I have 3 children. My oldest is 10 in 5th grade. Last year, I've watched her deteriorate in front of my eyes. She started to hate school. She felt like she was in jail. After realizing that this was because of all of the Common Core, I decided to have her not take the test, and I tried to encourage other parents, but unfortunately I was the only one in our entire school whose child did not take the test. I'm really scared about the future of our children. Like I said, this is my oldest. After all this, I considered homeschooling, which is not something I want to do, but I almost felt like this is something I would be compelled to do, which is a shame because I grew up going to public school. I think public schools should have a lot to offer our children. I don't think we should be forced to homeschool our children because our government is incapable of teaching them the right way and the way that they should be learning, not the way that everybody thinks they should be learning. I'm also concerned because my youngest is 3 years old and he has autism, and I'm worried that as he grows up and goes into school that he's going to be forced to take the same tests that all the other children take. And it's not fair to our kids who are not all equal. Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight. Mr. Scopus, it's a very inspirational upbringing that you just told us about, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. Thank you. I think that only goes to show how successful public education can really be when given the right curriculum. So I have a couple of statements I'd like to make, and then a couple of requests from you. I know you're here to bring back information to our governor. And I'm sure you know from many parents you've spoken with, the governor has not been responsive to our outcry. Just today my girlfriend said to me, have you heard anything from the governor yet? And so, no, I mean, none of us are hearing. Even a thank you for your interest in our educational system, nothing. And I've called, written emails, letters, nothing. You've all been very responsive, and I appreciate everything you're doing to help us. I want to ask that since you are bringing information back to the governor, his communications director, Melissa DeRosa, just put out yesterday a statement from the governor that states, the governor announced that he will assemble a panel that includes education experts and members of the legislature to identify flaws in the Common Core's rollout and take corrective action by the end of the session. The governor believes there are two issues, Common Core and teacher evaluations, and they must be analyzed separately. Where is the issue of data sharing? There's no mention of that here. And I called and I let them know it's very frustrating because the whole InBloom matter has been so out there. And that's where many of my calls to him, many of my emails were regarding InBloom. So this needs to be addressed. I don't know why he keeps shoving it under the rug, but this is a serious matter. Our children's futures are at stake. I'd appreciate that. The other thing that I'd like to ask, if you can please endorse for regions, Riley, Rose, and Baker. They're the three that can help us the most. If you can please do that. Listen to them carefully and please endorse them for regions. I'd like to just let you know, Mr. Zabrowski, your office has been extraordinarily kind with their time with me. And I had mentioned that I would deliver some samples of the information that is in the text that we were very concerned about as a community. It was taking off, the stuff that I got was taken off of both Facebook pages, and some friends have sent me some things. So I have samples of that I can give you. I also want to give you the letters, if you haven't seen them already, from James Milgram and Sandra Stotsky. These are the two validation experts that did not sign off on the Common Core standards. Are you familiar? I'm sure you're familiar. You've heard all this already, right? But the point that they made, which is very valid and needs to be mentioned again, I believe, is that Sandra Stotsky has spoken regarding teachers teaching about speeches, that they're not familiar with the historical context of what's going on at the time. So while Common Core discusses rigor, how can you get into a rigorous discussion about a speech given if the teacher is not aware of the historical context the speech is given in? I mean, these are very valid points that made her say, I'm not signing off on this. And James Milgram, also, if we're promoting STEM programs, well, stopping at Algebra 2 is not promoting STEM, not forgetting kids at college. Oh gosh, okay. So I'm here, I gave you a heads up on my email to ask you to please, my main point on being up here today is to ask you to please let us know what federal regulations and state regulations there are against refusing the test, refusing the test. Please let us parents know what can happen if we do opt our children out, because I believe that there's a lot of fallacy out there. I think that we're being scared into believing that there'll be federal aid that's cut, and I don't believe that. Everything I'm reading online says no federal aid will be cut, no federal aid. So you get a slap on the wrist of the district. That's what I'm reading on the refusing the exam. That's what I'm getting. We need answers from you on what will happen to our districts if our children have a less than 95% participation rate. We need to know that. If you can please put out a memo, some sort of general letter for us to know, so we can go to our district and say, look, it's not true. It's not true. We can opt our children out comfortably and know that no aid is going to be cut. We need to know what the ramifications are for our children and our district. So I think that's it.
I want to thank you for having this forum. I also didn't prepare anything. I just sort of jotted down my thoughts. I'm the parent of a 5th grade daughter, typical girl, and a 12-year-old son who has autism and Fragile X, which is it's a genetic form of autism. As a parent who has an autistic child, I'm very used to battling with the school district for different things. I never really thought I'd have to battle at this level for both of my kids, but here I am. You know, a lot of the things that come to mind when I think about Common Core, everyone has spoken about, but there are some things that I will add. The emphasis on testing is certainly over the top ridiculous. The content of what they're learning seems to be developmentally inappropriate. I have a big problem with the fact that most of what my daughter learns is nonfiction. There's very little fiction, very little room for creative thinking in this whole curriculum. I just see her, you know, it's all about rote learning, and I find that really awful as someone who also went through public school in Clarkstown and really had a rich literary background that inspired me to become an English major when I went to college. You know, I really got that, and my daughter's getting none of that. I find, you know, when I hear about the direction that they want to go in terms of, you know, having each kid maybe get their own computer, I don't know if that's something that's really going to come to fruition. I pray it doesn't, but that notion seems ridiculous. You know, kids need to be socialized, and to have them sitting at computers, you know, like they don't do that enough at home. I have a real problem with that. You know, I don't know, I hope that doesn't happen. So to me, this is like a real dumbing down of our kids, and a race to mediocrity is what I've heard, and I agree with that. I have a big issue with the fact that special needs kids are lumped in with everyone else. There's no individual in IEP. They've completely lost that individual emphasis. These kids learn differently, and they're at different levels, and that's, you know, that's just how it is, and they don't seem to care, and that really is very, very disturbing to me. And the idea that they should take the same tests, you know, I know kids at Jesse Kaplan who, you know, can't even write their own name, and they're given these insane tests that, you know, I just, it's absurd. It's just absurd. I also want to say, you know, this is an issue that I feel and I've seen has united people across the political spectrum. You know, there's Democrats, Republicans, Independents, to a person, when anybody I speak with, nobody likes this thing, you know, nobody. And to see, you know, how bad does this have to be to have everyone agree that it's bad? You know, you really don't find very many issues that unite people at this level, and boy, oh boy. And I'm very disturbed also by the fact that our you know, leaders, our leaders don't seem to be listening. Our kids are, you know, learning about bullying in schools, but I feel that we're being bullied as parents, as teachers, as you know, human beings. They don't listen. It's scary. It's frankly very scary. And I also want to say one other thing. I think if you could do something like this again at another, like, a daytime forum, I think you'd get a lot more people. I have tons of friends that I would have loved to have made it out tonight and couldn't make it out. But let me tell you, this place would be 3 times the size. There's so many people who would really come out in against Common Core. So that's all I'm going to do.
Thanks for organizing this, guys. It's really appreciated. I'm speaking today as a father. I'm concerned, honestly, about the direction I see that my child's education path taking. The fact is that in America we have a long-standing tradition of local democratic control of our schools. It's not just based on tradition, though, it's logical. We're not some small country with the same group of people everywhere. We're a large, diverse country. There's very little that a school in the inner city of Los Angeles has in common with a school half its size in Nebraska's farmland with the school in Rockland County. The people who know what's best for kids' schools are the teachers and parents of those schools. The problem with Common Core is a base one. It's not a matter of how it was implemented, which was terribly. It's not a matter of whether the testing is fair or how much it is. It's the fact that you're trying to take a one-size-fits-all approach to a country that is just not one-size-fits-all. It's a diverse country. So it's not enough that we say that we're going to put a moratorium on this. It's not enough that we say that we need to revisit the standards or lobby or something like that. The fact is that New York needs to take a stand and return control of education to the parents and teachers who have resoundingly rejected this Common Core. I know plenty of teachers myself, proud to know at least a dozen close friends who are teachers. Not a single one of them has come home one day and said to me, "We did a really good job teaching this lesson in school today since Common Core has been implemented. I'm really proud of what we taught our kids today. They really learned a lot." No, they're not being taught the proper things. In America, we teach people not what to think, but how to think. Common Core has forgotten that completely. It's the basis of liberalized education. It's the basis of our education system. And it's time that we listen, that our democratic representatives undo what was done undemocratically. Withdraw us, deal with the federal funding issue, lobby Congress, deal with that, but we need to take a stand and say, we're not going to follow and toe the line that some bureaucrats already decided was going to happen. We're not going to bow to their will, we're going to assert our will, what's good for our kids, not what's good for corporations or what's good for an industry. Thank you.
My name is Kelly Baker. I live in Pearl River. We moved there from Yonkers, New York for the school district. I have 3 kids in elementary school, 4th grade, 2nd grade, kindergarten. And I'll just tell you my own experience with Common Core. They were above average children, happy to go to school. They're little yet, they're, you know. Fine, after Common Core, they're failing miserably. They feel stupid. One of my child who took a star, whatever it's called, last year, is well below average. And I wonder, how did he go from well above average to now well below? And I know why. It's because the tests are not appropriate. It's like me trying to be a doctor and taking, you know, I feel stupid. I don't know any of the answers because it's not appropriate for my level. Math is too complicated and for no reason. Instead of, you know, just adding the regular math, they break it down into 4 different steps. And these steps I never heard of. I can sort of understand it if I take the time to study myself for a 2nd grade homework assignment. But then to teach my own child it, she can't get it. I'm trying to explain it 100 different ways, and there's no reason to get it. All it is adding 2 numbers. That's all you have to do. You know, you don't really need to know why to do it. Just do it, you know. But I'm a stay-at-home mom, and it's taken away my responsibility, and I am home to be with them, to help them after school, driving them here, there, and everywhere, but also to help them reiterate what the teachers and what they've been learning in school, and I can help them, but I can't help them because I don't know what they're doing. I don't understand it. And now it's you know, I might as well not be there. We might as well not even do homework, you know. In English language arts, they're learning, my 2nd grader, again, 7 years old girl, learning about Buddhism, Hinduism, Allah, the Quran, China, Confucius. I can't even hardly pronounce them. She can't spell them. She doesn't know she even lives in like New York State or Pearl River and now we're talking about the whole other side of the world, all these different religions. She doesn't even understand her own yet.
You're good.
She
cries anyway, which is not so funny. She's crying constantly. I tell her she's smart. It's not it's just Common Core. It's nothing. They're asking you things you don't even know the answers to. It's not your fault. It's not appropriate. But I could say that all I want. She's in school learning math for an hour and a half, and she's not getting it. I don't have to tell her she's stupid. She knows she's stupid because of what she can't answer. She can't answer anything. She said even the smart kids don't know the answers. I don't know who knows the answers. Our school system wasn't broken before, but it is now.
Thank you very much for meeting with all of us. As you can tell, I think we have a lot of very frustrated teachers and parents. We're living with the Common Core on a daily basis. I, like Ms. Baker, come from Pearl River in a school district where we had over 90% of the children were college bound. And now, I don't see how this education is going to help them be college bound. I have a second grader, kindergartner, and a preschooler. And I'm seeing a second grader come home with a different method for adding on a daily basis. She's actually coming home with 3s and 4s on this math, but she's already learned on Common Core, you can get the answer wrong and still get it right. And I'm not really sure how that's a method to be carrying on in life, that if your math is incorrect, it's incorrect. But in Common Core world, it's not. And it's frustrating to say the least. And even though my child is considered doing well, she's actually exceeding in it. She's frustrated, and she's absolutely done with school. She doesn't want to go to school. She doesn't want to sit for an hour and a half of math every day. And she doesn't want to read nonfiction stories that, to say the least, are inappropriate and boring. They're above her head most of the time. And there's a wealth of fiction out there. There's a wealth of written books that they can be taking things from. So I would like to know who, and not just the rollout or the implementation, but this needs to be changed. Someone needs to look at it that actually knows what they're doing and have to change it. My child shouldn't be coming home with stuff that confuses me. I did go to college. I think I did pretty well. I like to say I know my math. And I got to say, I've told her just add it the way you would normally add it. I don't know the 15 steps. You're never going to, I can actually say you're never going to use that in life, because you're never going to draw 50 dots in order to there's no time for it. On top of that, I think that it's great there's a moratorium. I don't know what that means for next year, but I'm scared because I do not want my child to enter 3rd grade where the reading content is completely inappropriate. And I think that if a district has to send a letter out in advance of reading, then that should be a red flag that your children shouldn't be reading it. They're 8 years old. They don't need to be told, and they don't need to be sat down to discuss something prior to reading it in school. Pick a different story that is more appropriate for their age. And I find it hard to believe that it's taken this long for people to put the brakes on this. And I really hope that someone can get back to us and tell us, well, who is going to change it? I know that we're looking at right now, we're looking at how it's going to be rolled out and everything, but who is actually going to be changing it? Even now, the content is riddled with errors. The books are nothing but frustration, especially for a 7-year-old trying to fill in lines this big. It's just, everything about it is frustrating, and it's carrying on to the rest of our lives. I mean, you can't just enjoy 2nd grade. So we'd like to know who actually is in charge of the change, who's going to look at this, change the errors, change the content, and then we can maybe look at whatever the big picture was on this big rollout. But thank you again for looking at it, and we appreciate it.
My name is Nicole Tarifi. I'm an English teacher at Suffern Middle School. I'm a taxpayer who lives in Airmont, and more importantly, I'm a mother whose firstborn son will be attending our local elementary school's kindergarten next year. I've spoken recently at many of our local school board meetings, imploring our board to reconsider what we value in our district, in spite of the rushed implementation of Common Core, Expeditionary Learning, Engage New York modules, APPR, Race to the Top, DASA initiatives, In Bloom, Response to Intervention, the Tax Cap and its gap elimination, and the omnipresent overlords of Pearson. My 4-year-old son, Gray, is going to be caught in the mire of these protocols and more, and as a mother, I worry. He, like his mother, is loquacious, inquisitive, and a visual and auditory learner. At night recently, we have been reading an abridged version of Les Miserables, and he enjoys discussing why Thénardier is antagonizing Jean Valjean. On the other hand, my 2-year-old son, Reed, is a horse of a different color. He is a musical learner. Did you get my Wizard of Oz reference? Okay. For 2 weeks daily, Reed and I discussed our home phone number so he could learn it, but to no avail. Finally, inspiration struck me. I taught him the number to the tune of Carly Rae Jepsen's Call Me Maybe. After only 2 attempts, he had mastered it. Obviously, my 2 sons are different learners. I cannot teach them the same lesson, not only because they are at different ages, but because they process and access information differently. What I see at home can also be seen in my classroom. My 96 8th grade English students' reading levels vary from 4th grade to college level, and their learning styles are just as diverse. It is educationally unsound for me not to differentiate my lessons for these learner styles. As Diane Ravitch said in her recent book, Reign of Error, a good education steps outside the world of textbooks and worksheets and introduces students to worlds that they never dreamed of and to ideas that change their way of thinking. The problem with Common Core in our classrooms is partially implementation. The funding that is linked to these standards requires persistent testing, regardless of how students express their knowledge and mastery. My students are not merely test scores. They are not machines to be programmed by the same codes and language. I fear that my sons, Gray and Reed, will have their curiosity extinguished due to the constant testing, the curriculum, and the modules that New York State suggests drown our students in a sea of mundane repetition. While in the midst of a module provided by Engage New York, one of my 8th grade students recently wrote the following on her essay. Upon initiating my progress through this assignment, I hereby surrender my creativity, intellect, and personal interpretation of literature to the administrators of this test and their superiors. With the final essay of this module, she wrote, "And so concludes an era of ease, but not of enlightenment. The wings have all but been clipped, and soaring amongst the heavens will be a dream unattainable until flying is an expectation." Wow. Schools, at their core, are intended to enhance a child's natural ability, ignite his or her curiosity, and expose them to just all that is of wonder in our world. None of this can be achieved when children feel that they must surrender to a curriculum that has become sacred dogma in our state in less than 2 years. A student who claims she is surrendering isn't growing, she has given up, she is defeated. Please, do not allow our children to be defeated by an ill-advised curriculum that embraces a one-size-fits-all approach to the magnificent mosaic of children I am entrusted with each year.
I
Thank you.
homeschool not because of choice, but because of lack of choice. I myself have 2 master's degrees, one in electrical engineering and another one in computer science. I have worked on weapons detection systems for Apache helicopters. Maybe I'm not a rocket scientist, but watching and looking at what happened to my daughter, the similar horror stories that you heard tonight, I decided, that's it. I pulled her out. I am not going to be forced into a school district by zip code that failed to implement the Common Core. Now that I'm homeschooling, we ourselves have to have an assessment test every other year. She is classified traumatic brain injury from birth. Last year, she had to take the test and sit there for 140 minutes, 6 days straight. Now you can see why I homeschool. Looking at the math that they put forward, nobody's going to be an engineer. I'm sorry. My husband is also a broadcast satellite engineer. Heads or tails, it's not going to work in the real world when you get older. I don't know who implemented this. I don't want to know. I seceded. I drop out. Now, because I have to take this assessment test every other year by New York State mandated laws for homeschoolers, when private school and charter schools do not have to, because they do not receive federal funded programs. I would like to have the homeschooling law changed, considering we do not receive federal funds. There's no reason why I should be taking those assessment tests. Now I have to align my TBI daughter to Common Core, so she has to take the 5th grade science test. Not by my choice, by New York State mandate. And to have her sit there again for another 140 minutes and do nothing in her protest to refuse on taking the test. Now that I'm homeschooling, I have her on Time for Learning online curriculum that is aligned to Common Core, so-called. For the last 3 years, she failed in English language arts. She is getting 100s this year because it was a different way of implementing it. My daughter's different. She wants nonfiction. She wants real world. She wants science, which they failed to teach her last year because they drilled the test. She got science once a month. How are you going to be able, in a better school district, implement the so-called requirements that I am doing at home that they can't? But the homeschooling law is going to have to change. I'll be more than happy to help you set you up. The only way that any parent is going to be able to change this is to see. You have to drop back and punt. I don't want to be a part of it. And my daughter's doing much better. Take a second look at the laws and what's fair to private schoolers and charter schools should apply to everybody else.
I'm an art teacher down in the Bronx, and my wife is a English teacher in Scarsdale. So we have kind of both sides of the spectrum every night at the dinner table. Plus, we're both parents. We have Clarkstown kids, and so we see, a lot of different sides. Scarsdale is a very high-performing district over in Westchester, where they've been actively protesting No Child Left Behind for about more than 10 years. And so they were one of the original opt-outs. But even before that, like the opting out that the students were doing down in the inner city is legendary. Okay, I teach my 7th year now, and the kids are extremely disconnected down in the inner city because from 3rd grade to when we first meet them in 6th grade, there's a complete social-emotional disconnection, a lack of joy. They get extra math and ELA, and their gym, art, it's all taken away. Social studies, science, it's all reduced. Because they keep thinking that if you pack on more math and ELA, it's going to help the problem. But we have kids that have a multitude of problems down where I teach. In recent years, in the school that I was in last year, the best math teachers left because they saw this was coming down the road, the teacher evaluations, where standardized test scores are attached to a percentage of your evaluation. But it's even worse. They also increased, just in recent years, the amount of testing from 4 days a year to 6 days a year, which basically wipes out more than a week of school where you could be learning. But it gets worse. After the tests are over, your math and your English teachers are taken out of class, and they put subs in, and they're taken out to go score the test in a different building. Okay? Now this, you could also heap on top of that the practice tests, which was another 4 to 6 days in my school, and the drilling, which they would allocate about 20 minutes a day for the whole month leading up to the test. So you're talking about over 22 days of learning that gets lost in math that I counted, okay? After the tests are done in the springtime, in my school, the year is over. The kids they don't care. They said, we took our tests, they're not engaged anymore, okay? So let's talk about this year. This September, the teachers showed up to work, and we found the details that a percentage of our evaluations are being tied to math and ELA scores, standardized test scores, right? What about the fact that most teachers don't teach math or ELA? So the way they handle that is that in my school, we were told to pick. What do you want, math or ELA? All right, now the fact that they're giving us a choice is proof that it's inaccurate because we're choosing, okay? And it gets worse. And it gets worse, okay? Teachers were also allowed to, in my school, to opt for a school-wide option, meaning that you can tie your 20% of your evaluation to the performance of the entire school, which means that it means that we're getting evaluated on kids we may have never even met. Okay, so I see I'm out of time here, but you know, all I want to say is that you know, up here in the suburbs, a lot of kids have tutors. In my wife's district, more than 50% of the kids in the classroom have tutors. It's just completely inaccurate, and in my opinion, it's a waste of taxpayer money. That money should be reclaimed for wraparound services, for more teachers, counselors, psychologists. I say fire Pearson, Scholastic, McGraw-Hill. I don't know what to say. Thank you all.
First, I want to thank you all for your advocacy in education. I've spent a lot of time talking to both Alan and Mr. Kenneth, sorry, I have to call you by name, both of your offices, and it's been wonderful to know that there's always somebody who's educated about education to talk to, because that hasn't been my experience a lot of times when it's called federal offices. So it's been very good to have conversations. I'm the mom of two really great kids. One is in grade 5 and one is in grade 8 in the Nyack School District. My kids hate school, and it makes me very sad to say that. They love learning. My children love learning. So what are we doing wrong that we can take two kids who love learning and are inquisitive and love a challenge, and they hate going to school? It's not because of their teachers. I know that for a fact, because they have some of the best teachers. The teachers are inspiring and they're trying really hard, but they have basically their hands tied behind their back. It's the mess that they walk into every day when they go to school that they don't like. It's the tension that they don't like. Start with the lockdown that comes with standardized tests. I work in Europe a lot, and I was explaining the way that we give the tests, these standardized tests. The climate in the school on the days of the test, the fact that if a child throws up on a test, it gets bagged and sent to the company. It's insane. This is not normal behavior, and my children know this, and they don't want to be around this, and they don't feel safe. They don't feel safe at school because of this. The pressure around the test is crazy. The kids feel it. We've gotten so far away from reason that my son, after finishing the test 2 years ago in 20 minutes, was made to sit and stare at the wall for more than an hour, for 3 days running, until he broke down at breakfast and cried and said, "Don't ever send me back there." What have we done to this child who was successful on the test and was still penalized? And you know, this punitive behavior, this bullying, is crazy. We got that changed, the sit and stare. I was so angry that I spent 2 months on the phone making sure that sit and stare policy got taken out of the manual. Well, now sit and stare is being used to bully parents who want to refuse the test. So last year, our district sent out a notice the week of the test saying that if your child tried to refuse the test, they would be forced to sit and stare. How do I explain to my kids about compassion, teach them not to bully, when it's being modeled by the administrators who are being bullied by the state, who's being bullied by the federal government. the kids have the weight of their teacher's success on their shoulders. That's crazy. In what universe is it fun or motivating or inspiring or teaching compassion to have the weight of their teacher's success on their shoulders? It's insane. Parents are afraid. I'm afraid because I'm afraid my kid's data is being sold to the highest bidder. I'm afraid I can't protect my children when I send them to school. Like, how nuts is that? It really has gotten crazy. School is not safe right now. And I want to send my kids to a safe place every day where they're learning to be compassionate, loving, inspired human beings. The regents need to be reined in. The 8th grade this year is collateral damage. The regents have decided that the kids can take the Common Core regents, and then they're allowing them to also take the regular regents. If the regents is not ready, if the Common Core regents is not ready, or the kids aren't ready, which are the only 2 reasons why they would be offering this, then they shouldn't be offering it. They shouldn't be forcing them to take 2 tests. The 8th grade kids are completely stymied by this and terrified. In Bloom needs to be stopped, not stalled. We're not stupid. We see our kids are being sold. Stop selling our kids. It's not safe. We need guidelines so parents who refuse, because we see this as our strongest act, don't get bullied into doing something that they know is wrong. We need to push for a commissioner who understands education. His policies are under-informed and uneducated. And lastly, in stopping, we need to take a step back and acknowledge just how insane this has all become. We need to think about it. Forcing our kids to do nothing for no good reason, bagging tests up, all this stuff. Cuomo's dragging his feet. 4 months is a long time for an 11-year-old. We need to change now, not in 4 months. Thanks.
My 8th grader. My concerns about Common Core are many, but first of all, Common Core curriculum is a United Nations initiative. United Nations federal coming down. And that's one of my biggest concerns. I believe over the last 10 years, our school system has taken away the focus from our basics, reading, writing, and arithmetic. To graduate from the elementary school in the 1800s, the exam had 5 questions. Most high school graduates couldn't answer those questions. By the way, with the United Nations, our schools should be locally controlled, not dictated by the UN. Our children are not being taught civics. Many of our graduates know little about our government. A lot of them don't know who the vice president is. An uneducated public is dangerous, and our founders of our country knew that. My junior is taking AP classes in Spanish. He's asked to write persuasive essays on gun control, poverty rates in Indonesia, women's rights issues in Spanish, page and a half long. I believe there's an underlying agenda. He is choosing not to take Spanish next year. I skimmed through the SAT and PSAT workbooks. Similar topics are in those workbooks. My 11th grader, very, very bright. He sees an underlying bias, and he tells me every day. I believe Common Core has been infiltrating our school system, and I fear it will have a negative effect on my 8th grader, who is a visual learner. He learns so differently than my other son. I believe if Common Core continues at this rate, we will lose a natural resource. We will lose an educated populace. Thank you.